Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to this Facebook Live. I'm very excited. The week has gone flying by, and this is our last activity of the HiPo week, Right Management in Partnership with People Matters. And I have with me Prashant Pandey, Country Manager of Right Management India, and Parul Pandey, BP Talent and Engagement at DIAGEO India. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on this Facebook Live. As you know, the Right Management and People Matters HiPo week is on its 6th year running, and this week has been a fantastic week. A lot of activities, roundtables across India. We had a tweet chat, we had webinars, and all of this is possible by many of you who have been participating in the activities, sharing your stories, but also bringing all your questions to our leaders and making this initiative growing year on year. And a special thanks to Prashant and the Right Management team for helping us put this program together.
It's been a pleasure working with you and your team for the past 6 years, Esther. Looking forward.
Thank you.
For many more years to come.
Thank you. Same here. So the conversation we have today is on high potential competencies in the digital age. Has something really changed? And this is a conversation that is very exciting for me, especially because we have two leaders representing two parts. So Parul has worked as a L&D and OD professional across different organizations, now in DIAGEO. Prior to that, he was in Microsoft and Deutsche Bank. So has really seen high potential change, and we'd love to hear from your point of view whether digital age actually has made a difference or not. Has it changed or not? So I'm going to ask you some few questions on that.
Sure.
And Prashant has the opportunity to work with many companies, helping them on designing and implementing large-scale talent management initiatives, and high potential is a very important component of that. So we'd love to hear your diversity on what you've seen organizations across industry doing. So I'm going to start with the first question to both of you, really about how is the digital, and we'll do that, I know this is a big question, so we can go on this question for a long time, but very briefly, if you were to simplify, how has digital actually really changed the way we look at business? And what is the fundamental shifts on the conversation at the top management when it comes to looking at businesses? And how is digital disrupting businesses? Parul, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I think the fundamental shift that I've seen in the last couple of years as digital has grown is that the senior leadership is now seeing customer in the center as never before. The customer's experience at every digital touch point with the suppliers like us or organizations where they co-create content or co-create solutions, the customer is really at the center, can decide to fire you or hire you in a day because the way digital has changed the way we interact with the customer. I think the other big piece that is really changing is the back-end work, not so much for digital organizations as much for a supplier, manufacturing, traditional organization, is the possibilities that IoTs are creating. IoT really is going to bring a revolution in the whole delivery chain as we reach the customer. So the key challenge for us then is, how do we find the right talent to take care of both these pieces? So how do we do the same business in an absolutely different way?
Wonderful. So you're saying from conversation at the strategic level is really the customer, and at the operational delivery is the opportunity or the possibilities. Very nice. So I'm going to come to you on how are you finding that talent and what are the challenges that you're facing. Do you resonate?
Completely, I resonate, and I think it's both internal and external where the impact is happening. External, as she rightly said, the customer is becoming more aware. They have more access to data, and hence they're more demanding. So that's a huge impact. So keeping customer as the center of each conversation is more as an outcome. Because the customers are more demanding, and hence the way you engage with them, that has to go through a fundamental shift. The customer behavior has changed because of digital, and that I completely resonate with Parul said is a huge disruption that is happening because of digital. And hence, what you can do internally in terms of the way you design products, the way you design your services, the way you engage with customers, that has gone a huge sea change. Also because of digital, what you are being able to do with data and digital, two sides of the same coin. Because of digital, what you can do with data and processes and derive insights from them, that also is giving a lot of power to organizations. Now, how do we use that power will change from organizations to organizations. Some organizations are extremely smart in terms of using digital to deal with data, capture that data and process it and derive some insights out of it, and then coming out with a response, which is a strategic initiative, a strategic thought that you may come across with, and some organizations are able to do that and some organizations are not, and that's why you clearly see some organizations falling by the wayside and some organizations really growing in terms of the way they grow. Young organizations are coming up and really blossoming because they are much more smarter in terms of capturing that data, processing it and coming out with a completely new disruptive model, completely disrupting established organizations because of the way newer organizations are dealing with data.
So tell me one thing, Prashant, and I'm coming to you on this, Parul, as well. Is what I'm hearing you say is that what people are doing, or what talent or what high potentials are doing in terms of where they spend their time is different, but has what we look for in high potentials changed?
Sure. Yes and no, because there are certain fundamental elements that have not changed. For example, every high potential, be it digital or the early era before that, needs to have a strategic bent of mind, needs to have execution capabilities, and needs to be people-centric. What has probably changed is the degree of the strategic bent of mind, the way you need to display your strategic thinking, that has changed. The speed, the agility with which you need to drive execution, that has changed. Yesterday, if we had a luxury of implementing an initiative and do it in a year's time, today we don't have that luxury. Today you have to drive an initiative and ensure it is successful probably within 6 months, right? So hence your agility and your speed with which you need to execute, that has changed. Similarly on the people side, while fundamentally your people skills are still required, but the way you engage with people in the digital age has changed. How do you use digital platforms to engage with people more smartly, give them experiences which are very unique? That definitely has changed. So your smartness, fundamentally, if you bucket them, you still need strategic thinking leaders, you still need leaders who will drive execution, you still need leaders who are smart in terms of engaging with people. But if you think of strategic bucket alone, the way you need to display strategy, your means to display that strategic thinking, that has to go a fundamental change. The way and the speed with which you need to drive execution, that has got fundamentally changed. The way you engage with people, the tools that you use to engage people, and the larger purpose for which you are engaging people, that has got that has gone through a fundamental change. So yes and no is what I would say.
Challenging too. So Parul, you have seen shifts in businesses before. When you were in the banking space, then when you were in IT and product space, now in a very, very different industry. And hearing Prashant, things have changed, yes and no.
Right.
But you said, we really are going to struggle to find the talent who will understand that the customer needs to be at the center and have that empathy and that sensitivity. But at the same time, who understands technology to leverage the opportunities that technology bring to top line and bottom line of our business. So how do you think the definition of talent is changing in your context, and how do you think it's tremendously different from before? Because those changes have happened before as well.
Absolutely. So I think Prashant has summarized it very well. I will not repeat that. I will just add a couple of nuances to it. So for example, in strategic thinking or really shaping the future, we know that a person who can look at trends, figure out what comes in the future, how businesses are changing, would be able to shape that future, would be able to articulate it in an inspiring manner. But what is nuanced there is that there is so much data and information out there. Do we really know what are the right questions to ask? What are the right hypotheses to make? And then take out our insights, which are sharper, which are clear and impactful. So that's the element that we look over and above the strategic thinking and shaping the future. Similarly, when we say we need to engage with people across geographies, across digital platforms, what is it that we are looking for? We are really looking for people who can build on ideas from across virtual platforms. Use the tools which are collaborative annotation tools, collaborative perspective building tools. Most organizations now have Quip or Yammer or places where we can share all our ideas, and each one building and editing the same document. We can build on the ideas of others. So it's really about radical collaboration on utilizing the digital space. So that's the nuanced additional piece that I think is very, very critical to be successful in today's world. So these two, I think, really make up for the additional pieces over and above really delivering with flawless execution. Because most organizations are spread across geographies, across time zones, and teams actually are not really in that, like the earlier times, are not sitting in one place. So how do you use digital to make sure that you're ready for future? You're building on every country and every culture to build solutions.
So how do you identify some of those skills? Which you said one is sense making or making sense of data and things, and the second was, I really like the word you use, radical collaboration or collaboration at a scale. How do you identify? How are the traditional ways being broken when it comes to identifying high potentials?
That's really one of the biggest challenges. Is right now we have tools to assess the regular competencies. We know what personality profile would best suit. We know what result areas we need to look at to kind of predict potential. And similarly, we know how to assess potential for competencies, putting people in situations. What we are really struggling with, how do we assess digital competencies? And we don't have a solution. We're really going through a trial and error kind of a method. Right now, doing more of open-ended interviews to figure out how people solve for some of these. And maybe a predictive, kind of an analysis on how often have they gone right. Are leaders more often right when they're using multiple pieces of information, making a prediction? Have they gone right or have they gone wrong? And when they go wrong, what do they do with it? So some of these questions give us cues to, are they really plugged into the future? Are they the real leaders of our future? So have we solved it 100%? Do we have a scientific answer? Not yet.
Not yet.
But we are on our way, and we look for some solutions to come from consultants.
So tell us, Prashant, how are some of the organizations that are spearheading the identification of high potentials in the digital age, what are they doing different? What have you seen, and what is Right Management doing to build some of that ability to identify digital skills?
So when we talk to organizations, we will give them a triad that they really need to sort of explore, and this whole template, if I may use the word, against which you need to map people on. And the triad that we speak to them is the good, tried and tested IQ, which is a fundamental, right? The second part of the triad that we talk about is again something which organizations now intrinsically very well understand, is the EQ part, which is the emotional quotient of that part, which how do you handle and engage with people. The third element that we bring into this whole equation is the DQ part, which is the digital quotient. So it's IQ plus EQ plus DQ. And the first thing that we tell people is that when you're talking about high potentials or leadership in general, and when you're trying to measure that DQ, don't confuse it with the functional knowledge of digital, because we are not watching out, we are not searching tech guys. What we are searching out for, people who understand and appreciate what the technology brings as power. And if they can translate that and visualize that in terms of how it can impact the organization, some part of the business model and overall business model, if that visualization that they can do, so that when we talk about DQ, the digital quotient for a high potential or leadership in general, what we say is the digital quotient is your ability, your foresight in terms of appreciate. If I try to put a definition, for example, IQ has a definition, EQ has a definition. So if I try to put a definition to DQ, what DQ in my mind, a very fundamental, a very rudimentary definition would be your ability to appreciate technology, think 2 years down the line in terms of what technology can do to consumers, to my internal business systems, and hence your ability to appreciate, prioritize where I want to attack first and do it successfully and execute that successfully. Now, if that is what you're watching out for, the tools from an identification perspective would be then, again, some very similar tools that we have used in the past, but use it very differently. For example, certain tools that you're using to measure strategic thinking, now using similar tools and similar tools to watch out, are they able to bring the digital angle to their strategic thinking mindset, whether they are able to do that. So on one hand, while digital is a disruptor, your solution is also digital. Right? So if digital is causing disruption, because of which now you have a distributed team to manage. But now to manage that distributed team, what is your solution? Digital. So the solution of digital disruption has to be digital. So hence, when you're talking about watching out for digital competency, you have to use digital platform, digital tools, and you have to use them very smartly. And that's what we engage with organizations in terms of how do you use that more smartly to identify digital competencies. What you're watching out for, probably the nuance changes, the dimension changes, and the solution lies itself in digital. So that's what we tell organizations are doing differently. One case in point that I can think of is, again, one of the the companies that I have quoted once in one of the master classes is this FMCG company that how they have used digital platforms to identify, to think in terms of the comfort, in terms of their adaptability to a technology, a new technology. When you throw them in deep waters, how do they respond to it? Right? They may not be comfortable today, but are they open to the idea, and are they willing to try it out, and are they able to think, visualize, reimagine in terms of how it's going to impact? If that is something that they are able to do, we have got the right guy or girl.
To some extent, even the development is a way to identify as well, as you are creating opportunities for development.
Right.
So tell us more about the, I like what you said, Prashant, about is the person able to appreciate how technology can bring better customer service, or how can technology or digital bring more business outcome. So how are you using development as an opportunity to create more of that talent internally?
So again, I think the content of development probably would be very similar to what we would do for any other HiPo program. How we create the experience of digital as we would for our customers is the key. So if our HiPos can experience the whole journey through amplified through digital, that's really the key. So, as HiPo development programs over a time have really evolved from what we hear in our traditional organizations, from people going into, say, Paris or London, into exorbitant campuses for programs, intense learning on leadership skills and strategic thinking. What they have now moved from there to is experiences across different learning zones or opportunity zones. Then somewhere we also heard about the 70-20-10 principle, which gives them experience on the job or coaching on the job, and so on and so forth. Today, the kind of learning that we are enabling through digital is, while you're on the job, we curate learning, or AI curates learning to support you on your goal achievement, on your aspirations. So it's really embedded in your work, through your work, every day. So learning is happening every day, everywhere, all the time. That's what digital creates as a possibility. So if you, like for our HiPos, what we're experimenting in our organization is that you set your goals, and those goals could be a position, could be a skill, could be a mindset shift, and we will curate the material and it'll keep coming to you. All you have to do is go on a portal, keep posting your goals, milestone achievements, and we will judge what is it that you would need next. And it'll keep coming to you while you're living your life on your job every day. So that's what digital has become. It's so seamless a learning experience that you don't have to go back into a classroom, which is also available, by the way. We call them labs, where you can go, practice, like do some net practice on a skill or deep reflection. and then come back. But we've tried to make learning very seamless while you're on your job and growing on your job.
Yeah, wonderful. So Prashant, any example, and we've heard some examples about how digital is integrating development, and it's not just a one opportunity or one-off, but it's really integrated to the person's job and mostly to the person's goal, whether that's a professional goal or even a personal goal. How have you seen organizations, especially the HR community, leveraging the power of digital? How would you rate us as a community to say, so if we're talking about how high potentials need to leverage the power of technology to do things differently, how are we doing as HR community, and where do you think is there opportunity for us?
Yeah, so, and before coming to the rating question, because that's a
tricky one.
You know, and it's almost like putting me on the spot. If I really need to speak my mind, but in terms of from a development point of view, typically when we have conversations, we always encourage organizations to have a conversation at two levels. One is at the what part, and then comes the second part. If that is the what we are trying to address, then the how part, and how part then gets answered in terms of using smartly digital wherever you can. The what part very clearly would be an outcome of the strategic priorities that you are trying to drive, and it will be, so the what part, usually if you have some smart conversations within the organization, the business leaders get that. The how part is whether, because that's where investment needs to come, that's where shift needs to happen, that's where a lot of energy goes in terms of executing, because you know, curating a smart, nice, fancy how on paper and getting it executed on paper requires, it's completely different in terms of the energy that it requires. Culturally, people are comfortable with a certain way of learning. Put me into 2 days of a classroom, you know, because then you have that undivided person. If you give access to certain content, these are real risks that we deal. Will the person actually spend time on it, you know, and how do you push the person, you know, all these are real in terms of answer. So yes, so I think to answer your question in terms of how do we do that, so the how part really needs to be think through, because there are certain very obvious hows to it in terms of how you can. There are some very obvious areas where you can use how part, but how do you do it? How do you do the how part? Is a tricky one. It requires a lot of energy. An example that I can think of a company who's doing that very smartly is, again, you know, that I would speak from my personal experience, is a retail company that we are working with. On the how part, you know, so we have developed this learning app that we are using with them. We are testing out with, this is one of the first clients with whom we have tested out. What the app really allows us to do is create something that, you know, using personalized learning is a nice fancy thing to do it, but creating the technology itself is an easy part. Then the real experience comes because of the content that gets loaded onto the technology. That requires more continuous effort, because you need to refresh the content, you need to speak to the consumer of that content to understand, is the content making sense to him or her. And then you have to be very agile in terms of changing the content on a continual basis. So if a case study that you put up on the learning app and you serve it to the individual, did it make sense? And if it did not make sense, then do you have something else to serve? Now this is an organization that I see works very closely with us, and they have been working, because once the app gets developed, it's a done job. The platform is available. The relevance of the app comes because of the content, and you have to constantly work with the organization, and it's not something that we can do as outsiders always. The internal organization really needs to do a lot of work around that, and that is something that we see this organization in specific doing very well. Now coming to the tough one in terms of how do I rate. I think the intent is there. So the intent is there. I think the biggest area where internal HR would need to shift is in terms of they need to become very aggressive sellers internally into the system, into the internal systems. The fact of the matter is, there is no organization today who would have abundant resources, unlimited resources. Resource constraint will always be a reality. Every organization would have. Now, I am, as HR, as a function, trying to pull my share of that limited resource that an organization has had. And for me to pull out that resource that I need to drive my initiatives against somebody else who is putting in, I need to be a great seller. I need to sell well internally. My challenge is a lot of organizations, HR, are not great advocates, are not great salesmen, saleswomen, if I salesperson, if I have to be correct in from a gender perspective in today's world, are not great salesperson internally to get that. So the idea is there. I want to do this, and it require an investment. Now, how do you get that investment? You need to sell it successfully internally. So when you are not able to sell it internally, you put pressure externally with your partners in terms of scaling down what you want to do, knowing fully well it's going to have limited impact, and you are willing to live with it. And if that is what they are able to do well, be great salespeople internally, I think a lot of things that they want to do, they'll be able to do successfully.
So tell us,
Prashant, I just wanted to add here, advice is exactly what I was thinking. So from my own experience from being within and also outside, half my career has been as a consultant. Within, what I realized was that I'm not sure if we can call it or term it as a selling. As long as the learner is at the center. Like I said, anchor all learning on the learner's goals. It solves for itself, and we've seen it happen at least in 2 of my earlier organizations. The completion rate for long learning journeys is more than 95%, simply because they know what's in it for them at the end of the journey. They're the ones who are deciding. So customized learning, it just doesn't mean that you curate material and have your ideas and sell. It's also about what does that person want, and what are her unique needs that are going to solve for and help her reach that goal, and just ensure that she gets those in an interactive, engaging, digital, new technology method. That's solved for a lot of our issues. Similarly, a little digression from learning per se, but an organizational transformation initiative. We really had to identify what are the bottlenecks in our culture today that are holding us back and we're not reaching our business goals. Till you connect what are the business goals and what are the possibilities beyond because of this culture, it's very difficult to do that or make that sale. So ideas in themselves not necessarily will be able to sell, and it's really about the consulting skills. It's really about going deeper into figuring what is it that you're trying to solve for. And who's at the driving seat. The moment you take that selling role, HR becomes the driver. And that is a sure shot way of failing at it because you want the business to drive it. It has to solve for the business, by the business.
Absolutely.
HR is an enabler, advisor, and sometimes a conscience keeper to where the budget should go to do the right thing. So that's
So HiPo for what, right? Eventually, if you're not able to link it to what's the business directional shift.
Absolutely. And it's like you have to sell the value. If I'm selling this pencil to some consumer, I need to tell the person, the buyer, how this pencil is going to add value to his life. It's the same. Any talent management you want to invest on, say, chatbots, right? Everybody's talking about it. But if you want to go in and get budgets out for it, how do you sell that whole concept? And your ability to build that value proposition so that the business gets excited. Whoever, the CFO, whoever, every organization has their own decision making process. It could be the global in an organization. So many times you need to get the global aligned, right? And it could be your CEO in a very controlled, family-owned business. Ultimately, all said and done, it's you have those power centers who take the decision. Ultimately, you have to sell the idea to that one individual who's that power center. Can you do it? Is the big question. If you can, problem solved.
And I think at the end of the day, it's all about that alignment for the final outcome, which is a team's outcome. So I think anything that we try to drive as a community, that we do it for the sake of HR excellence, won't necessarily drive that change. So coming back to the HiPo in the digital age, and I'm going to ask you that concluding question to both of you, for all our audience that are listening to us today. What would you recommend them to probably start doing and stop doing when it comes to high potentials in the digital context? One start and one stop.
So again, something that I believe very deeply, and I've spoken about this before, I think in the digital age, high potentials need to have a broader perspective, because the impact of digital is all pervasive. The way it is impacting organizations across industries at some level is similar, the speed is similar, and hence high potentials need to have a broader perspective. They cannot in any more be cocooned within my own industry and what my own industry is. So my widening of my perspective in terms of understanding business models of different industries, that absolutely needs to happen. So start exposing them to different models, different industry would be absolutely critical. Start getting them to be appreciative of the power of technology. Can they speak about a technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, IoT, nice phrases. What does it really mean? And what does it translate? What can it do? How can it impact the life of the customer? How can it impact internally? And if you don't do this, what are the consequences? If you don't imbibe the technology effectively in your organization, what could be the consequences? If they can visualize and have a conversation around that, I think that is step one. So start doing that.
Stop doing,
I would say, stop getting defensive about the high potential programs. Again, something that I speak about pretty passionately. Don't do half baked stuff. Go whole hog. You don't have the time. The disruption is so fast that 6 months down the line it may be too late. So have trust in your processes, have trust in the intention of the high potentials, and go whole hog. Empower them, do what is necessary, do wide, do deep stuff. Stop, so start doing that and stop being defensive of it, and stop doing half baked. Let's do this much today. 3 months down the line, we'll wait for the experiences and then decide what next. Come out of that mindset.
Wonderful. Thank you, Prashant. Parul, start and stop.
So again, in the context of digital, the way digital disruption is going, by the day we get new solutions, new software, new tools, that completely redefine the way you can do the same job. So I think critical piece that one has to start in organizations, particularly for HiPos, is to encourage them for continuous lifelong learning. Stay in that zone. You've never achieved, and it is not like a batch mentality that you're now entitled to stay even at the same stage or base in your career. You have to be in the continuous learning mode, because the speed at which solutions are coming your way. That's one big thing that we need to start. Encourage learning, reward learning, create a culture where there is continuous conversation on learning. New tools, new disruptive tools that can change the way we do business. Stop doing, I think one key thing is stop in certain context organizations where there's a lot of legacy culture. Stop shutting ideas saying this is how we know success is created. This is how it's always been done. So stop that. Let's start having open conversations on, okay, so what's your idea? So that, I think, is something that we should stop doing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks, Parul. Thank you so much, Prashant.
Thanks, Ester.
And thanks all of you for being there for this last session of HiPo Week 2018. And it's been a great week. You'll have access to all the information and all the webinars and all our archives on the HiPo page at People Matters website. And we look forward HiPo Week 2019.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Excellent. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.